everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Possible Human. I'm thrilled today to have my friend and buddy, Bill Quateman, aboard. And Bill's going to talk about a really interesting and amazing technology. He's the founder and chairman of a concierge regenerative wellness company, BioCell, I believe.
Advanced BioCell.
Advanced BioCell. I get everything right but the name. And so, before we begin, why don't you tell us just a little bit about your background and where you who you studied with, and some of the discoveries that you've been making.
Sure. I studied for 32 years with a professor of psychiatry, a holistic professor of psychiatry from Northwestern University. He was a wonderful tutorial, Dr. Bruce Boyd. And I learned all the things about natural medicine you could possibly want to learn from him and the amazing natural medicine practitioners that I work with, naturopaths, chiropractors, MDs along the way for the better part of the last 40 years.
Yeah, that's somewhat how I did it too. I know that I couldn't learn the really important things in college because they have their set agendas to know about certain things and to be within the lines. And if you want to know the important things, sometimes you have to step outside the lines and work with the people who are really doing the investigative research. And, well, the alternatives are outside the lines at this point.
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And the mainstream is not picking up on it.
No. There's real science, and then there's the more kind of academic science, and people are finding out about what really works anymore, and they're not so connected to the research and the data and all the things that the conventional community would have you want to believe.
Exactly. So, what is Advanced BioCell?
Advanced BioCell is, like you had mentioned earlier, a concierge regenerative wellness company. What we do is we meet individuals where they are, and we help solve any health problems that they may have with one illness or one disease or another, help them stabilize their health and maintain and prevent illness, prevent themselves from getting ill. And then we do our best to guide and educate people that where they can go is to a level of what we call extreme health.
Now, the way I met you was a friend of mine had a very serious infection that wasn't getting better with traditional medicine, and I intervened to help her out. I took her to see our friend Isaiah, he's a naturopath, and he does intravenous ozone. And the ozone goes and attacks the viruses, the bacteria, the mold, and the fungus in the body and boosts the immune function of the system. And then you showed me something while I was hanging out as she was getting her treatments from Isaiah. You showed me a technology, and I'm going to be honest about it. When I saw that little box that's about the size of a deck of cards, I thought, oh God, another gizmo. I have been so up to here with gizmos, and especially healing gizmos, because everybody pulls out their box and hold the rods, and you're going to get your healing, and it's going to work on all these frequencies, and my skepticism, my shit detector was on full blast, and so okay, but I'll play. I'm game to play.
You've always been
I
a
attach
good
these
player.
little electrodes to my earlobes, and all of a sudden, it's like my whole state of consciousness shifted really deeply. And it was almost like I was feeling a little dizzy and disoriented, like, whoa. Now, what this does is it seems to put people into a really deep alpha state and retrain the brain. And I'll have more to say about it in a few minutes, but why don't you pick up on that?
I will. Do you have it in front of you? You can hold it up.
Yes,
for everybody to see.
this is the device right here.
It's called the AlphaStim.
AlphaStim. Are the leads on it that you can see that attach to the earlobes.
Right.
And then here's a little bottle of fluid that I use to wet the leads so that there's a better current flowing through them.
Right. Right. That device is called the AlphaStim,
Yes.
and it is a personal use electronic medical device which actually amplifies the alpha waves and organizes the chaotic brain waves that are going around everyone's head most of the time.
Yeah, I found it really fascinating because going from a state of, you know, moderately feeling fine and just being okay, let's call that normal. And then I put this thing on, and all of a sudden, I started feeling really like I was in this meditative, very calm, very peaceful, open space. And that was just totally surprising to me that just doing that for a couple, just having it on my head like that was going to make a difference to
This
me.
is good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good. Plug yourself in right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
What the Alpha Stim is designed to do is to relieve. It is for the relief of anxiety, depression, and insomnia.
Well,
And it has a patented brainwave pattern, which is delivered through the earlobes with what is called microcurrent electrotherapy. And the technology itself is called cranial electrostimulation. And so what's happening right now is you are allowing this little device to amplify your alpha waves, which are associated with intuition, learning, creativity, relaxation, to become dominant in your brainwave experience.
yes. And the friend of mine who I brought to see you and to see Isaiah, she is among other quantum touch people, she's extremely good at perceiving energy.
Yeah.
And so I asked her, I said, look, I'm in a really different state of consciousness now as I have this thing attached. And I'm going to send you some heart energy now, and I'd like you to perceive what the heart energy seems like. And her eyes got really wide, and she said, it's pure white light coming. There was like no personality anymore. And so I think, and this is all speculation on my part, that the alpha stim combined with the level 2 quantum touch or even level 1 quantum touch will shift the state of mind of the practitioner to be able to enhance whatever positivity they're bringing into the session. And because even a small shift of your brainwaves can make a big shift in the quality of energy that you are projecting. So, I have not endorsed any products, through Quantum Touch ever, and yet I find this one really interesting and compelling because it's like a tool that not only can help people through stress and depression and other emotional states that they're going through, but it seems to retrain the brain,
It does.
and it can be used in conjunction with the healing work. It could be used both for the client and for the practitioner.
Exactly. What it does is it induces
Yes.
an experience of deep relaxation, of calm. And so what you then have, like a good meditation will give you, is a physical experience of what it's like to be in that state rather than, oh, is it happening yet?
Yes. Now, my sense of it is that it has some impact on retraining brain waves. Is that been your experience or what the company has found?
Well, yeah, what it does is especially for anxiety and depression and insomnia, what it does, it will actually relieve the problems that people have from being too anxious, from being too nervous, from being too stressed out, which leads to the depression that people can feel, which leads to the lack of sleep that people get because everyone's nervous system gets so overamped all the time. so that it does, in fact, have a therapeutic effect. In fact, it does. The research and the data, which is huge, all shows this in graphs and in clinical trials. It's a 30-year-old device, and it's had dramatic success with the veterans, dramatic success
Yeah,
with people going through rehabilitation
yeah, the
and drug
PTSD, I imagine.
PTSD is huge. Fibromyalgia is gigantically beneficial for fibromyalgia.
Yeah, my experience overall has been that the word stress has been a terrible generalization that people use because stress is really specific emotions. If the mother is experiencing a lot of stress in her life, well, the answer to stress is relax, right? But maybe she's afraid that she's losing her job, her husband's having an affair, and the child is sick. Well, the answer to those problems are not relax. They're to deal with the issues directly, and yet finding those times of peace, with something like this, can be enormously beneficial. Even giving a person enough peace to even want to process the emotions and deal with them in a more effective manner.
You couldn't be more correct, Richard. I mean, the truth is, it's kind of like a vortex, which is to say, what's the best way to solve a problem? Well, it's from a state of relaxation. Well, how can I relax if I'm so stressed out? Well, relax. Well, how do I relax if I'm so,
Yeah,
that's the
it
point.
goes in a circle, and yet a lot of people might assume that if I am stressed out, the only thing I need to do is relax, get a massage, sit in a hot tub, lay down, meditate. But that didn't change the core elements of the emotional issues that were at the heart of the reason you were stressed in the first place. People don't get stressed in a vacuum.
Precisely. And the thinking that we go through, the stories that we tell ourselves over and over and over again,
Yes.
is the first step to creating those emotions. It's a very interesting story. Great success with the psychological community. A psychologist friend of mine invited me over, and he said, "I hear this is very good for depression." I said, "Yes, it is. So I have a chronically depressed client. Could you come over and give us a little presentation?" I said, "Sure." He went over, came over. The gentleman was on the couch, and he was obviously, not a happy fellow. And just like you, we plugged him in, and within 45 seconds, he was sitting on the couch smiling.
Huh.
And what it really demonstrated was, in spite of the fact, in general, for a broad generalization, unhappiness, depression, anger, all of these negative, afflictive emotions come from the stories we tell ourselves over and over and over again of I can't do this, I'm not good enough, the world's not safe, I'm not lovable, all those beliefs
Yeah. Right.
that we all know these stories. So the truth is, when this person was using the AlphaStim, those stories might have been going on in his head, but the AlphaStim overrode them.
Right. Right.
And so he might have been thinking them, but it didn't affect his brain waves because the brain wave pattern from the CES, the cranial electrostimulation, had overridden those stories, and they might have been there, but the brain waves were changed.
So the device is putting a little tiny bit of electricity on the
It's
earlobes,
it's the same.
creating a frequency, various frequencies, and then the brain is responding to those frequencies and shifting its patterns of activity, I suppose.
Well, what it is, it's the same. First of all, the electrical voltage is the same as your heartbeat, about the same as your heart, the same
Hmm.
voltage as your heartbeat. So it's really non-invasive,
Yes.
for one. For two, it's kind of like an overlay, a pattern that's a pattern which is amplified alpha waves and evened out chaotic beta, theta, and delta waves. So kind of like a biology book where you have a picture of a skeleton and then you have a plastic overlay and you have
Yeah.
the organs and then you have the muscles. So it overlays that on top of that chaotic pattern so that you can experience what it feels like. Either you put EEG electrodes on your brain and get a readout of what you're having in the way of brainwave activity. Or in this case, you put the earlobes on, ear clips on, and you have those patterns put into your brain,
Hmm. Interesting.
which
Interesting.
is what's happening.
What I kind of experienced after the first 3 or 4 times I used it was that I didn't feel like my normal brainwave patterns were the ones that I had had before I had started using it. Does that make sense?
Yes, because they weren't.
Okay, so it
Because they were
has
they
more of a long term overriding effect. It isn't just when you're using it, it seems to have an impact beyond that.
Yes, the research shows and the experiences are that it is residual. The effects of using the device are residual and cumulative.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's very powerful, very impacting. It's like everything that you and your people do, all the quantum touch people do that I've been learning about
Yes.
from you and the experiences I've had personally and with my son and with some of the doctors that we've worked with that I've watched and seen you measure and seen you shift is what you refer to as the life force energy,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right? Am I right about
that's
that?
correct. Yes.
Okay. So what we all take from that, those of us that get familiar with it, is that everything comes from the life force energy. An aspirin comes from the life force energy because that's where all that gets created. Pharmaceuticals come from the life force energy. Doesn't mean we like to take them or like to use them, but they all came from that source.
Well,
So,
you're using the word in a very broad sense that I wouldn't quite.
well, what
Yeah.
I'm saying here is, for example, people go to Lourdes and they have a healing. So what happened? Well, we don't know what happened, but one thing that may have happened, hypothetically, is they, through faith,
Yeah.
got an amplification of that life force energy that
Well, I
then,
would I would probably disagree with you on that level. I think that what I've learned about Lords was that I saw the research on it. The further a person had to travel to get to Lords, the more dramatic and likely
uh-huh,
the healing would be, because it was a more powerful placebo effect.
faith,
Well, but placebo belief, not just
faith,
faith, but whatever
pla-
word you use
pla-
for it, yeah. But
placebo's okay.
yeah, placebo is okay, but I really differentiate the life force energy and the healing work that we're doing from a psychological mechanism, because we're seeing dramatic effect on infants, animals, people under general anesthesia, plants and fluids, and things that have no potential for activating a psychological mechanism placebo response.
I understand. I guess where I'm heading is that one way or another, at times, people can benefit from a little nudge in the right direction.
Oh, I'm not
And
arguing that
and
at
what
all.
you're doing, what you're talking about, I think, is the same as what an alpha stim experience can do. It gives someone a little nudge in the right direction where they're more available or susceptible to having an effect from a beneficial experience
Oh,
with the life
I
force
totally
energy.
agree. I think of the life force energy as that animating current of life, the
Right.
thing that differentiates something living from something not living. Now, everything is made of the all that is energetics, and on some level, it's all consciousness and it's all alive. But the useful energies that we're utilizing come from things that have the higher life force. That's why I'm a huge proponent of living food, of exercise, of meditation, of running the energy as we learn to do with quantum touch, because all these things are massively enhancing to the life force energy and uplifting to our soul, spirit, bodies, everything else, and then utilizing something like the AlphaStim to enhance. And it's more like the cherry, not the cake. You
I
know,
agree completely.
it's
That's the place I was kind of heading to with
okay.
this whole
Good.
thing, which it gives you a enhancement and an amplification of the benefit that's already there in how it works.
I was just having trouble with the aspirin of pharmaceutical being life force energy.
Well, they're not life force energy, but
Yeah.
they came from this one spirit. It went off on the wrong road, probably.
Okay, that's fine. But I just like clarification. So
I agree with you. I agree with you. Of
yeah.
course, penicillin has saved lives.
Well, hey, I'm a big fan of antibiotics in their place when they're necessary. I'm a huge discourager of antibiotics when they're not necessary. Antibiotic soaps, I think, is a world disaster in the
I agree.
making because you're building these superbugs. People taking antibiotics when they have a cold, which is insane because it's just creating these. And now they got these superbugs in the hospitals.
Well,
That,
what we're seeing in general, what you're referring to is a massive miseducation and a
yes,
disinformation and a lack of insight. People in this country, especially, are really pretty much hypnotized by conventional wisdom, medical wisdom, unfortunately. But I think there's a shift coming, and certainly the work that you're doing, in my thinking, really has a lot to do with that.
yeah, I think so too. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about the research that's been done over the last 30 years, you say,
Oh
on
yeah,
the AlphaStim? Because you kind of broadly covered a lot of ground, and I thought it'd be fascinating to hear what kinds of things have they been finding. And then as a secondary thing, I imagine they've really been attacked by the FDA.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. You and I have talked a lot about how, what your work is so beneficial to people,
Yeah,
yet at the same time it's unofficial in a real way. At the same time, it's probably more official in an unreal way. And you're, so deserving of a recognition and a breakthrough to a larger audience. And it's interesting because the people at AlphaStim and what's called CES technology, cranial electrostimulation technology, have been subject literally to the same kind of, I would say, abuses and disregard and actual, attempted sabotage by the bureaucracy of the conventional community. This technology has, certainly evolved, but been essentially kind of the same over the last 30 years. It, Eric Clapton and Pete Townsend used this very technology to get off heroin 25 years ago. They've had tremendous success with the Veterans Administration using this device for post-traumatic stress disorder. They have used this to great success. They have a clinical trial, a study that they did at just a psychiatric hospital in Texas where it wasn't even drug addicts. It was just a population of older, very, very mentally ill people that were very violent. And the main means of dealing with these people was physical constraints, solitary confinement, and drugs.
wow,
There was like, a lot of injuries to the staff just to keep these people organized and in line while they were living in this facility. Well, they did a 3-month study and they put the AlphaStim uh, into practice in the facility. And over the course of 3 months, the use of drugs went down by 50%. They had 40% fewer injuries to the staff. They had 40% fewer confinements. And there was a dramatic, I think it was a 60% decrease in violent episodes.
wow. That's really fascinating that it could have that kind of impact on that population.
It does. That's why they chose it because it was such a difficult population. I've spoken with Dr. Brian Earthman, who's a psychiatrist. He's a former Army psychiatrist who served in active duty in Iraq. And he says to me, he had a few alpha stims in Iraq. And he said, let me ask you a question. Would you rather have a soldier protecting you who's been on Ambien and may or may not be thinking straight? Or would you rather have a soldier who's been using an alpha stim, who can get enough sleep, who is using a non-toxic device to help him with a terribly, terribly, terribly stressful and anxious and nerve-wracking situation, who can't sleep and is probably somewhat depressed over everything because it just I can't a battle zone just
Yeah.
cannot make sense to anybody.
Well, it's beyond stressful. It's
So
ridiculous. Yes.
he said the difference between the soldiers that were taking, sleep medications and those using the AlphaStim was night and day. He has been medical director for two different rehab facilities now, one in Texas called the Arbor. And he says the first thing he does, a new client comes in, a new patient comes in who wants to get clean from one drug addiction or another. And the first thing he does, he puts them onto the AlphaStim for an hour. And he finds that throughout the treatment experiences he has, the clients that use the AlphaStim, when they come in, during, and after, A, they are more likely to stay with the treatment, and B, there's no question about it, there is a lower rate of relapse.
Wow. So, okay, so for drug addiction, PTSD, depression, these are,
Fibromyalgia,
and yeah, what about the fibromyalgia? You haven't talked about that one.
yeah, fibromyalgia is again, there's so many things, colitis, again, insomnia. There's all these different aspects that relate all the way back to the beginning, which is some type of nervous disorder, some type of thought process that leads to emotional discord, which leads to chemicals that run through your body and your brain that make you nuts and make you crazy and make you unable to relax, which is where the healing comes from.
Yeah. Yeah, well, being in an open, relaxed state certainly accelerates all healing processes.
The research is clear. The research shows us that a body that is relaxed, musculature, physiology that is in a relaxed state, cannot experience anger or anxiety.
What about people who are just not experiencing those major symptoms? How would it benefit somebody who, wasn't in a war zone or depressed or going through major trauma?
Right. Well, like yourself, for example, you are a bright light, and you came in with, we took a hair tissue mineral analysis and we found there were some imbalances that we want to
Yeah,
correct, but God, everybody's got that.
exactly.
So you had an experience that was an organizing experience
Yeah.
for you. You had an experience that was, even though I experienced you as a high and evolved being, yet at the same time you felt that there was a clearing for yourself. As a health device, let's twist this around, as a health device, it amplifies the production of ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. The cells in our body use ATP as fuel. Our bodies take food or supplements and turn them into ATP and then use that ATP as fuel. The AlphaStim boosts the production of ATP by about 500%.
500% ATP increase?
Yeah,
That's insane. Really?
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So as a regular daily, I mean, I am in wonderful shape. I'm in, terrific mood. I have excellent self-regulation. I have all kinds of good qualities. But I start out the day typically with an hour with the AlphaStim to just kind of settle down onto the pond in a nice kind of way, answer emails, make a few phone calls, and it's just an excellent way to kind of smooth into the day-to-day experience.
Sounds amazing. I had no idea that it would increase ATP. I was thinking if you were going to say 15%, I was going to be impressed.
Yeah, yeah, it's a pretty strong device. So there's any number of ways to look at it. It's a potentiator, for
Mm-hmm.
example, for any of your practitioners that are using your technology already, that wish to potentiate their own energies. The people that they work with, like you said,
Yeah.
they can be using the AlphaStim to help them settle into the benefit a little easier, a little quicker with what your practitioners are bringing to them?
I would think it would be a really nice thing for both the practitioner and the client to be experiencing at the same time. To have two alpha stims going, and one for themselves to go into these really clean, clear spaces where you're like I experience right now. It's sort of like there's no thoughts running through. It's just quiet in there for me. I
Uh,
mean, really quiet. And for the client to be in a more receptive, allowing space to experience the healing that they're going to be getting, it's a very complementary device. And I never thought I would be using those words in that sentence, that you have devices to be utilizing with the energy work, because I'm such a strong fan of working from the non-physical as well as the nutrition and other physical things, but to really do the healing work from more of a non-physical perspective. But this is a wonderful modality. I really like it.
I appreciate that. Advanced BioCell has a great benefit of working with a number of wonderful advisors. One of them is a mutual friend of ours, Michael Beckwith, Reverend Michael
Oh
Beckwith
yes,
from
sure.
the Agape Church. Reverend Michael uses the Alpha Stim on a regular basis. He's a big fan because of what you just said. It just puts him right into the same type of meditative state, and he's considering getting several for the practitioners during the services that hold vigil throughout the services, because it just amplifies, like you said, it's a complementary device
Yes.
to spirit.
So, um, I don't know. Are there other benefits that we haven't talked about, or do we do a pretty good job of summarizing them?
It's really good for stopping cigarette smoking. If people
Addictions.
want to stop, yeah, certainly nicotine. The specific is a psychiatrist in Los Angeles that did his own clinical trial. Anytime one of his clients, first of all, he said, which is true, you have to want to stop smoking.
That's always true. That's always the
So,
case.
always the case. So, for the people that wanted to stop smoking, he gave him a lender, an AlphaStim lender, and whenever they had a craving for a cigarette, they put the AlphaStim on, because there's no such thing as using it too much or too long.
Right.
So every time they felt a craving for a cigarette, they put the AlphaStim on. They got past the craving because it settled people down. And 5, 10, 15, 20, how many cigarettes do you smoke a day? Every time they felt they wanted a cigarette, they went for the AlphaStim instead. And over a period of about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, instead of a cigarette, they did the AlphaStim. They were through the cravings, they were past the addiction, and they had no withdrawal.
What percentage of them successfully went through the withdrawal?
For the ones that wanted to stop smoking,
Yeah,
it was like 80%.
that's really very high.
Huge, huge,
Yeah,
huge.
that's huge.
He
And what
said
about
one woman came to him and said, "Well, this thing didn't work." And of course, he said, "Well, do you
the
want to stop smoking?" She said, "No."
yeah. Yeah, it's like the old joke about the person who tries on all the glasses, and they said, "Well, I still can't read." Well, the person was illiterate; they didn't know how to read. Um, so that's very exciting to have it be that effective with addictions.
It is. It is. There's a larger model that they make that has the benefit of probes and electrodes for the management and relief of pain, joint pain,
Yeah,
neck pain, back pain. That's a
yeah,
different thing
it's a whole
altogether.
different thing because I've never seen anything work as fast as the quantum touch at working on the joint pain and the back pain and stuff like that. And then
Uh-huh.
when we're unsuccessful at using the energy to relieve the pain, we go straight into the emotions with self-created health. Find the emotional cause, give a person some homework to release and process those emotions specifically, and that usually takes care of it. So between those two, that's a really good modality for dealing with the direct pain itself.
Hmm. Hmm. But everything you were saying before is the same. I mean, whether it's drinking enough water
Yeah.
or eating the right foods or meditating or exercising or stretching or hugging or kissing or getting nookie or
Yeah.
laughing or going to the movies or having a great hobby or whatever it gets to be, all of these things matter and they all potentiate each other.
Yeah. I think as a generalization, all real therapies are synergistically empowering to one another, and all false therapies or destructive therapies are synergistically destructive. So, oh, you use that drug with this drug? Oh, that's a nightmare. These things synergize in a negative fashion. So, all good things work together, and all negative things counteract each other in a negative way.
Absolutely.
Put two bad poisons together, and you've got something really dreadful going on.
Which is unfortunately most of the case.
Oh, by the way, this is Enzo, and
Enzo?
he likes to be on he likes to be on the podcasts. So
Enzo looks like a good boy.
yeah, he's a really good boy. He had a charmed childhood, and he's just led this charmed life. He's a very happy person, cat.
Looks like it. Looks like it.
Yeah,
Animal energy is really I think, a really important part of life to be around.
yeah, yeah. He's a good guy. He's he's happy. It's really interesting that he carries this energy of being happy all the time. My other cat isn't quite sure. She's like, I'm
Oh,
not
really?
sure about it all, but you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
yeah. But he's just happy. He's a happy-go-lucky guy. Yes, he is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the interesting thing about cats is they're all kind of like their own individual.
They're all, their own personality. Yeah,
Yeah,
completely. Yeah.
yeah.
So, would you like to? Is there anything else you'd like to say about the AlphaStim?
Well, I think the world would be a better place if we all had one in the house, and instead of jumping onto the iPad or the iPhone or the
Yes.
computer or the video game or the Xbox, we took some time to 20 minutes on the AlphaStim, and the families would get along better, and people would feel less anxious and nervous. It's just a good thing to have around the
Yeah,
house.
I'm really glad I got one, and glad I use it pretty regularly, and I think I'm going to try using it even more regularly because if it's going to boost my ATP that much, I very much want to be experiencing that. Um, Before we go on to a bunch of other subjects, if people are interested in getting an AlphaStim, I understand that if they come through you, you can give them a better price than if they go to the factory or the company that produces them.
Exactly, because of our relationship together, any of the people that are listening to this broadcast, advancedbiocell.com is our website. Would I give out a phone number or an
Yeah, you can
email
give out a
address?
phone number or an email address or a website, whatever you like, or maybe all of them.
Yeah, okay, advancedbiocell.com, ADVANCED, biocell.com. And our phone number is 310 550 6767.
Okay,
And Bill at advancedbiocell.com is the email address.
okay. I'll make some titles before we put this online so they can actually read it on the screen and
Fabulous.
make that available. And they
Uh,
can just contact you and you can give them the details
I'd be happy to. Yeah, and
if
and
they'd like to.
it's a special kind of quantum touch promotional
Yeah, so
rate.
if people are interested in experiencing this, they can do that.
Right.
I've been really fascinated, you know, just hearing stories recently about people taking this thing called iboga. Are you familiar with iboga?
I've heard of it.
Ibogaine?
Yeah. Ibogaine.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because some people it's legal in Mexico and Canada.
Right.
It's considered, the schedule, what is it, one or three, the worst drug possible that has no therapeutic benefits and is highly addictive. And this is like this hell experience people get for 24 or 48 hours. They're in this like horrible physical, emotional state going through all this, just their body's terrible. When they come out of it, it's sort of like a reset button on their computer. And they have a tremendously high rate of helping people get off alcohol and heroin addiction, and it's tremendous. But there's no money in it, right? The,
It's a natural product.
it's a natural thing. They can't patent it.
Ayahuasca.
Yeah, ayahuasca is another one of those. And there's a podcast I listened to that I really recommend if people are interested. It's this woman, Amber Lyon, Lyon. I, I thought all lions were amber, but that's another story. She was a reporter for CNN, and she would go to war zones, and she found out that CNN was only telling like 60% of the story, and they were leaving out all the crucial points that talked about the corruption and the really nasty stuff that was also part of the story. And she came into being a reporter because she wanted to do good in the world, and she found out that she was just a tool of industry. And there was a podcast with Joe Rogan just a few months ago. There was one, I think, like over a year ago that she did with him that inspired her to go to Peru and take ayahuasca. And then the one a few months ago where she had come back, a changed woman. She had like 7 or 9 ayahuasca journeys in Peru. At one point, she felt like this angelic being was just showing her every one of the traumas that she had ever been through in her life and just lifting it off of her. And she saw how her desire to help out also induced her to accept this incredible amount of pain and trauma. And she's got this website called resetme.com, or reset.me rather. Yeah, it's reset.me, where people can go and learn about places where people can have safe ayahuasca experiences. And she also investigated mushrooms in Indonesia, and I think Mexico as well, and found out that the mushroom journeys were actually, I think this is called neuroregenerative, that actually help regrow brain cells. You think if you use hallucinogens, psychedelics, it's going to destroy your brain, but the mushrooms actually help people regrow and heal brain cells, of all things. And it also helps people with the PTSD as well. All these technologies, I feel like, are very important.
Well, it's all part of the natural world that's been kind of held away from us by the economics of, you could go into the story of how the corporations and how the bureaucracies and how the politics are causing trouble for all kinds of information and all kinds of people, and it's all true. What Advanced BioCell is, it's really a guidance and information
Yes.
and resource environment so that we can help people get educated to the ideas that are available to them in
Yes.
natural ways. It's like you do. It's
Yeah.
like what your work is all about. It's like we are all born with our ability and our body's ability to be whole and to be healthy and to heal itself. And along the way, ideas, emotions, toxins, imbalanced body chemistry come into play and drive us slowly off course. And there's all kinds of infomercials and commercials and advertising, whether it's Kentucky Fried Chicken or, Valium, that keep us off course. So we like to say, like, what you do is just open up and allow that energy to guide you back on to being in place so that your body can do what it would do if it wasn't being interfered with.
Yeah, I think part of my fascination is finding the real solutions in the world that work effectively, whether they're politically correct, socially known, or whatever.
Right.
And so, my work with the energy healing and the emotional process has been certainly outside the box, and I wouldn't be welcome talking to professors at UCLA, even though I could give them demonstrations of what I'm doing, because they are so committed to the system of pat answers. And yet I really appreciate these things that are available to us, even if they're not well known and well accepted yet.
Well, that's the point, is to bring them to people's attention so that they can make an informed decision for themselves rather than be inundated with
Yeah.
having to make one decision or another because of corporations or bureaucracies or advertising.
It's so fascinating because, growing up, I really loved the idea of the way our democracy was set up. I love the idea of the capitalism and free enterprise and individuals going, trying to achieve their own best well-being. And then you see that the unregulation of these things allow the monopolies to completely distort the playing field and to create these deep problems where solutions that don't cost a lot of money are disregarded. And
Yeah, well, that's the part of what I think is so wonderful about the internet. It's kind of like a nervous system
yes,
surrounding the world so that the intelligence, so to speak, can find itself.
it's well put. It is like a nervous system where we can find the best solutions and speak to one another on a larger scale, because this podcast will probably be seen by thousands of people over time, and who knows, when things go viral, and we're reaching far more people than we would normally reach. But it seems like as a society, we've created these systems that have sort of painted us in a corner where corporate profits have to happen on a quarterly basis. And that means that even though we know that climate change is happening and all these, 200 species are dying every day on the planet, we're in the 5th major extinction event, and ecologically it's a complete disaster everywhere you look, and just too many problems to even name, and yet, but if we change things, that would disturb our profit.
Well, the thing I like, Bruce Lipton, who's one of my very favorites, says of the extinction event, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is we're in an extinction event of culture as we know it, and the good news is we're in an extinction event of culture as we know it.
Yes, that is true. And I guess the big question is, will our consciousness evolve quickly enough to put off the inevitable destruction that we're creating? In other words, will we raise our consciousness in time to handle the ecological problems? That's really...
Great question. Great question. I always kind of look to science fiction in a sense to give us a little bit of what may be coming. And there's a piece that I saw, which is we were born on Earth, but we may not be meant to die on Earth, meaning that populating the stars is the destiny of humankind.
I have some real serious problems with that idea. And
I don't know what
the
it's
reason
right.
I say that, the reason I say that is because the next 100, 150, 200 years will pretty much determine whether human beings are going to survive as a species.
Listen, for sure.
And the second thing is, even if we had, and we don't even have anything remotely like that, a technology that could take us to the stars in even one generation, which is, the nearest star is like 6 trillion miles away.
Outer space.
Yeah, outer space. And even if there was a planet like Pandora in Avatar, where there's beings on there or plant life and things that we could even recognize, the bacteria, fungus, molds, microbes and such would be so foreign to us, and we would be so foreign to them, we'd as likely wipe them out and they'd more likely wipe us out, unless we had this extraordinarily advanced technology of changing our bodies during the trip to reacclimate to a completely different microbe set. But you realize we have evolved with our microbes on this planet for as long as there's been life. And the microbes have evolved and we've evolved together. And we're a minority here. The microbes are the majority.
There's no question about it. And at the same time, there's the singularity, the concept of the conversation about the singularity where the biology and the technology are merging. There they go. They're merging right there.
Yeah, you got it.
So that there's coming a point in time where the technology meeting with the biology will be such that the technology will be necessary to evolve the biology, and it gets off into some...
That's Ray Kurzweil's very popular science fiction idea, And I have enormous problems with it. And the reason I say that is because the very work with quantum touch exemplifies that they do not understand consciousness. And the idea that you can reduce consciousness into a mechanism of mechanics or a computer, as the singularity is, that one day we'll be able to download our consciousness into a machine and you'll be immortal. Well, my little demonstration that I showed you of untwisting a person's hips is a demonstration that they have no idea what consciousness is. It's not just the part that's able to play chess very well, which is what they think consciousness is. We are these unfathomable spiritual beings that you can't put into a box. And I want to actually at some point in the near future challenge Ray Kurzweil and support Rupert Sheldrake in suggesting there will not be a singularity. Oh, sure, maybe we can have mechanical limbs that can move us, and maybe we can even get, we have hearts that we can implant, and we can grow a bladder, and maybe even a kidney and a liver. All that's great. But the consciousness itself is coming from a spiritual, non-physical place. And you can't, and the wonder of the brain is that it somehow is able to access non-physical dimensions of reality and integrate it within a physical form. But I don't believe that they're going to have a physical machine that's going to be able to adjust a person's hips from the other room.
I hear what you're saying, and I couldn't possibly begin to fathom the potential for what may be coming up. Who knows how the human spirit can, in fact, infuse an inanimate object. It's hard to say how artificial intelligence, may in fact be affected by human intelligence.
All right. The word intelligence is really interesting in and of itself, because intelligence, and I just happened to see 2001 again. It was on TV, and I was totally fascinated by this 1968 movie to see what they had. And one of the great wows was, Hal is playing chess. God, can you imagine a computer could beat somebody at chess? Well, that's actually pretty easy for a computer to do. But they have no ability to function as a self-knowing, caring, soulful consciousness. So I've devised a new Turing test. And for those who don't know what a Turing test is, Alan Turing, who conceived of the modern day computer, thought that one day computers would be so clever. This was in 1950 he did this. He thought they'll be so clever that one day you'll carry around your computer like we do now a cell phone, and you'll be able to talk to it like your best friend. It'll tell you jokes, it'll be really smart, and you won't know if you're talking to a person or a machine.
That movie, Her.
Yeah, the movie Her, exactly. And so every year they have a contest called the Turing test. And the idea is, are you talking to a person in the next room, or are you talking to a computer? And so people type on a keyboard, and then letters appear as if somebody was typing, and you try to guess, is that a person or is it a machine? Very rarely does anybody get it wrong, because you make some goofy statement like, I'm really disappointed I don't have an atomic bomb like my neighbor. And then it says, has that bothered you for long? Why does that bother you? You realize, okay, this is just, I'm talking to nobody there. It's just taking my words and feeding them back to me. Well, I have conceived of a new Turing test, brand new Turing test. And the Turing test is very simple. If you can adjust somebody's hips from the other room, it's a person. And if you can't, it's a smart toaster. Because what is necessary to do that adjustment? I am accessing life force energy. I have love. I have intent. I have desire. I project with that intent, the desire, the breathing, the life force energy, and I see a physical change. I don't think in the foreseeable future, or maybe ever, that that could be too big a word, but that's just my perspective on it. I don't think that they're going to be able to infuse a machine with soul. and consciousness. Unless, this would be real science fiction-y, they created these consciousness entity devices I'll call conchions. And the conchion would be like human brain cells or something that function also like a computer, but they have a biology that has its own connection to source. Because that's what we're really talking about. We're talking about the connection to source energies. And the device, whether it's this or it's a computer, does not know that it's a computer, does not care that it won the chess game. You can program it to say, yes, I won the chess game, but it doesn't care. The parts of the device are all separate parts, and they don't have any communication with each other. You know that your liver or your heart or your lungs are deeply connected to all your thoughts, and all your cells are resonating with every thought and experience that you're having. You are one being, even though it has many parts we can divide from a mechanical perspective of, the old materialistic take apart everything, the reductionist idea, yet it's all actually a whole.
Well, I don't think that we're talking about replacing human beings. I don't think you can replace a human being. I think you might have technology that will enhance human
Certainly.
life and the like. But the human heart, and like you say, the human soul, the human
Yes.
imagination, enhanced by and coupled with these different elements, is what I really believe the conversation
Okay.
is.
Yeah, I can imagine at some point they could have artificial ears and eyes, and
Well, yeah, you'll have nanotechnology that'll operate better than your biology. You'll
I
have
don't
things
I
that
don't know
are,
about that. I'm not a
well,
fan of that
you'll
one.
clean out your blood, each
Maybe,
quicker
maybe. I
and the,
like what I think was, it was Colbert had Kurzweil on the show. It was a really great moment, and Kurzweil's talking about the nanobots that are operating within your bloodstream, and Colbert said to him, "Now, is there any way this isn't going to turn into a hideous nightmare?"
yeah,
And the audience just erupted,
right.
because when you're screwing around on that level, you're open. Your humility has got to be so high.
Wait a minute, we're screwing around with fats. You got mono unsaturated fats that are
Yeah,
killing people.
yeah.
I mean, it's
Have
already
you?
happening.
Yeah. Have you gone to the DMV and looked at what people's bodies have just? It's like this crazy science experiment where people are taking non-foods. They're getting no exercise. They're getting no sunlight, and they're taking all this wild pharmaceuticals while they're putting chemicals around themselves, from everything from their shampoo and their makeup and everything else. And they've got this unfathomable, and then you see these people their bodies have become incredibly distorted by not living close to nature on some level. And you don't see that distortion in animals in nature. They're beautiful. All the animals are like,
Well, you've come back to the same square again, which is the mind and consciousness. How is it that people have gotten so far off track? Well, they've allowed their minds to be infiltrated with all these kind of bad ideas, and they have just gone drifting off into space. I mean, all of the illnesses, all the degenerative diseases are preventable, are curable,
yeah,
are fixable, are healable. What aren't people getting? Well, they're not getting past certain ideas about how to live your life. If you want to change your health, you just need to change your thinking.
exactly, exactly. And change your lifestyle. And in terms of healthy shifts in health and lifestyle, I really am a fan of change things gradually.
Absolutely.
You try to make a right hand turn and just go from this way to this way all of a sudden, or go that way all of a sudden, and it shocks the system. People say, well, how do I shift over to eating, 70-80% raw food. I said, well, do you like apples? Have an apple, just
Uh,
have one piece of fruit, just do one thing this week, and then add one more thing next week or two more things next week, and just gradually shift yourself. And what happens is the bacterial life that's in your gut will make the shift with you. But you try to do it all at once, and you go from Twinkie and beer and that bacteria of processed everything to organic, raw, living foods. It is a shock to the system.
oh yeah, well the hardest part about coming off sugar is the withdrawal. I mean, it's a very, very big addiction. Pavlov was on his deathbed,
Yes.
and they said, "Is there any advice that you would leave for your students? One last bit of advice that you would leave for your students?" And he said, "Yes, um, passion and gradualness."
Nice, nice. Yeah, that's actually really good. I remember Elmer Green was the father of biofeedback, and what I loved and admired most about him. By the way, he's the one who introduced me to Norm Shealy, who tested my work
Uh-huh.
on his chronic pain patients. But the thing I liked about Elmer was that he had connected with his higher self as a teenager, and he really got to be in touch with his passion so deeply, and he saw what it was that he really wanted to do with his life. And so he couldn't wait to get to the lab and work on the biofeedback devices that he was inventing and working on. And then he couldn't wait to get home to his wife and his kids. And he couldn't wait to get out and play and do the things that he did. But there was no separation between the times he was having fun and anything else in his life, because it was all an expression of tremendous joy and passion. And so,
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember years ago, we all hear the great speakers and the great inspiring motivational teachers, and they say, find what you love and do
yeah,
what you love, and it's all a repeated message that is so meaningful. Years ago, there was a Barbara Walters interview with George Burns,
oh
and
yeah,
she's closing out the show with him, and she says, "Is there anything, George, that you would have to say to the young people out there watching the show?" And he takes a cigar out of his mouth and he leans into the camera. He says, "Yeah, find something that'll get you out of bed in the morning."
yes, yes. Well, to him, everybody was a young person at that point.
Oh, yeah, it was funny. Great line.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. Yes, good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very exciting. Very exciting times.
Yes, indeed. I really appreciate you taking the time to connect with us.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on your show. It's
Well,
been a real pleasure getting to know you over the past few months, and you're a wonderful, wonderful teacher, and I am in your corner and doing everything I can possibly think of to help you get your message out to a larger audience, which you deserve.
well, I'm working on some projects now to get some large visibility, and I'm very much wanting to support the contentions of Rupert Sheldrake, who got his TED Talk taken down for a while before they embarrassedly put it back up again. Their secret science committee decided that the questions he was asking were unscientific. He was suggesting that perhaps nature is not mechanical, and perhaps nature is not purposeless, and perhaps psychic phenomena do exist, and perhaps natural energy healing is possible. And he was proposing these as questions that could be researched in an empirical way with science, and they considered his talk unscientific for even suggesting that we ask these questions. Meanwhile, on the opposite side, you've got the materialists who think that everything can be reduced back to physics, the four forces, the strong and weak force of the atomic world, gravity and electromagnetism. And I'm here in my message to say, oh, our life force energy, our love, is that bridge between the physical and the non-physical, and we want to open up the question. So I really see a role that I want to play is to support Rupert Sheldrake and to help the sciences become empirical again, because wouldn't it be exciting if they could actually study all these things where they didn't have to keep attacking a device like this, or they didn't have to ignore quantum touch as a solution, or say solutions that don't make money like the AlphaStim, ayahuasca, ibogaine, quantum touch. It's allowed to have solutions that aren't highly profitable. Even things like marijuana have, in Colorado, where they've legalized it, the tax collection has gone way up, millions of dollars of tax collection, and the crime rate has gone down, I think 10% since they legalized it.
Yeah. Well, I think people are gonna, the bureaucracies are the last ones to find out, and it'll always still be for them. It'll be about money, but people are voting with their mouses.
I sure hope so. I sure hope so. Well, thank you, Bill, so much for taking the time to be here. I really enjoyed this a lot.
My pleasure, Richard. Thank you for having me.
Okay.